Okay, this is lab 1, building a cell phone microscope. So the first thing that you're going to do is take your parts, which are partially assembled but not fully, and remove the nuts and the ring washers. Now you do need all of these, so make sure not to lose any. All right, and you're going to see 2 pieces of plexiglass, one of which has your lens in it, the other of which does not have your lens in it, but you will probably find 2 springs. Now, with this one, go ahead and remove the covering. You can discard that. And then take off your lamp, set that aside. Now the important thing to know is that on each of these, you're going to have a small blue marking on the same side. All right, and you're gonna need to make sure that all 3 of those blue markings are on the same side. It doesn't matter if they line up, but this will keep your lens in the right position. So, first we're going to glue down your light. On the back of it, you'll see a little 3M strip. Go ahead and take off that covering. Turn it over. I find it useful to have this button, which turns it on and off on the outside, makes it easier to reach. And have that centered just in between these 2 front carriage bolts. Press it down firmly, that'll stick. Now, the next thing that you're going to need to do is put your stage on. So this is going to slide on like so, but we do need a way to be able to raise and lower this, and it's going to rest on these wing nuts. Now you're going to want to make sure that you put the wing nuts with the wings facing down. It's going to rest on the flat side of these. Might take a little bit of force to get these guys to screw on. That's because the bolts are galvanized. And you can move them about 1/3 to 1/2 way down. That's going to be the first starting spot for your stage. So you might need a small pair of pliers or a wrench to get it going on the first time. There is a small coating on the bolt itself. Once you get it going, it's relatively easy. But you do want to make sure that you can move it up and down smoothly, because these are going to be what you use to adjust your focus on your microscope. Make sure they're relatively even with each other. And then we'll put on the stage. Now you might notice that some of these have 2 holes. That's because I drilled it improperly. You want to use the ones that are closest to the middle. Again, making sure that your blue stripe is on your right-hand side. Now, next, in order to maintain tension, to keep this stage from wobbling, we have 2 springs. They're going to sit on there. And then we're going to have our next 3 bolts that go 1 on each, 1 nut on each bolt. This is going to be how your stage rests. Now, to double check yourself, make sure your blue mark is on your right-hand side and your lens has its outward facing side downward. Go ahead and set that. And then we have our final 3 bolts. You don't want to screw these in too tightly, just hand tight is great, otherwise you'll crack the plexiglass. But now we effectively have our microscope completely assembled. You can double check that your light works. It does take AAA batteries if you do run out of it. So that is assembly. So for this next part, you're going to need your cell phone and the printed out calibration piece of paper that I've provided. You're going to want to select from the many different sizes of squares which one sort of fits best in your field of view. So I recommend trying out multiple ones to figure out which square completely fills your field of view without overfilling it. So go ahead and place this roughly on the center of your stage. Turn your light on and place your cell phone in such a way that the lens that you're filming with is right on top of that lens in your stage. Now, obviously this is not in focus, and that's normal after you first build your scope. We're going to need to probably raise the stage a bit to bring it into focus. It might sometimes be too high and you might have to lower it. Now, in order to raise the stage, you want to screw in both of these ring nuts equally. To raise and lower the stage so that it's level. And you'll see that you'll slowly bring your piece of paper into focus. Now, once you get it as good as you can with the stage, your phone is probably also going to try to auto adjust. I recommend making sure that your phone is sort of centered in your field of view, so you're not too far off to one side of the lens or too far off to the other, but right in the center. And then also try to position your square. I'm choosing a 3mm one. In the center as well. Now, your phone will try to autofocus. You can sort of help it by clicking on where the square is. And the other thing to make sure that you do is you do not add any sort of additional zoom on your phone beyond the native resolution. This is to help with calibration when you are taking images of things later, to know that you're not adding any sort of digital magnification on top of what your phone and the lens already provides. You can snap a picture of that, and then we can take that over to the computer. Now, if your phone, like mine, has multiple lenses, I would recommend making sure to take pictures of the same square using those different lenses. On an iPhone, you can easily switch between these. And again, when you do switch lenses, you obviously will have to move the lens over. Again, centering it in your field of view. Help your phone autofocus a little bit by touching. Snapping an image of that. And then if your phone has a 2x, you'll notice that it's actually the same lens as the 1x, even though there are 3 lenses in here. And that is simply because the fact that I'm acquiring a video on this, it doesn't like to record video on that lens. So in order to sort of force it to use the native 2x lens, what you'll want to do is switch to portrait mode when you're capturing images. Now, because I'm recording a video, that's not going to work, but I have already pre-snapped a picture using that 2x lens, and we'll look at those images in the image analysis software Fiji that we're going to be downloading next. All right, so what we're going to be doing now is taking the images that you've acquired of your squares from your cell phone and calibrating the pixel size on your microscope. So you need to have downloaded Fiji. The link will be provided in the lab that we give you. Once you have downloaded and installed it on your computer, you're going to need to open Fiji updates. So go ahead and let that happen. But when it does run, you'll just see this little toolbar up here. The other thing is that you will need to have imported the images or image of the squares that you took from your cell phone. I recommend doing a direct file drop. I don't recommend using things like Facebook to send the images over, because that tends to compress the images, and we'd like to have these as raw as possible, just to sort of preserve the native resolution of the images that you're going to be capturing. I prefer to use AirDrop, but I do have Mac and iPhone, so anything, physical connection to the computer typically works well as well. So Fiji is good about opening pretty much any image or movie file format within reason. So JPEGs will work just fine. What you're going to want to do is take one of your images and just drag it and drop it into the toolbar. The other thing that you can do is go to File, Open, and then you can simply open the images that way. Right. So we're going to be working with an example image of my 1x lens. This is sort of an intermediate. So the simplest way to calibrate the magnification is to basically count the number of pixels in that this square has on each of its sides. Now we know sort of a priori that this is a square, so we can use the square or rectangle tool, which is the leftmost tool in this toolbar. So you can simply click on that, and then when you can go into your image, you see a little crosshair. If you click and drag, you can see that we form sort of a square or rectangle. If you hold down the Shift key, it will force it to be a square. So that's something I recommend doing. Now, it might take a little bit of manipulation. Once you let go of your square, you can still manipulate it afterwards. You can click in the middle of it and drag it around. You can also click on a corner and widen it. Again, I recommend holding Shift when you do this, but if you accidentally do that, you can still grab it and hold Shift and it'll snap right back to being square. Now you might notice that as I do this, in the upper menu, you'll see that it records what the width and height of your square is. Now if you're holding Shift, obviously that's going to be the same dimensions. So you can manipulate it around, and what you want to do is try to get it so that you have kept these lines roughly at the edge of this square. Obviously this is very dependent on the quality of your printer. Even with high quality printers, you'll notice that at high magnifications this isn't a perfect line. So use your best judgment in sort of figuring out where the best line is. And once you sort of have that, you can simply look at what the width and the height is as you grab your square. Right now it's at 1,236 pixels. If you let go, you'll notice that it doesn't actually keep that up there. So a simple way to check what the dimensions of your square is to hit the measure button, or M. And what this does is it pulls up a bunch of measurements that take inside of this square. And the one that we're concerned with right now is area, because area is just going to be in pixels, the total number of square pixels that your square contains. Now, if you pull up your calculator and you do the square root of this, 1527696, you do get, obviously, the side of the pixel, or the side of the square in terms of pixels. So this is going to be a very useful number. I'm going to go ahead and copy that, and since we know that, we can close our measurements. We don't need to save that. And now, what we're going to need to do is set our scale. And so I like to use this little search bar because it pulls up all sorts of different plugins. So we can look for set scale. And you can see it sort of already pulls that up, and we hit the run button and it brings up this little menu. Additionally, instead of going to that search menu, you can instead go to the analyze, and there it is, set scale. Right. So what this is going to do is calibrate your image. So we know that my square is 1,236 pixels on a side. So that is a distance in pixels in our image. And we know that that distance is 3 millimeters. That's the size of the square that I chose that sort of fit in my field of view. Now, it's going to be more useful to consider microns instead of millimeters. So converting 3 millimeters to microns is simply a factor of 1,000. So we know that there is 1,236 pixels in a real distance of 3,000. The pixel aspect ratio, we will always want to keep that at 1. That basically says the ratio of the pixel size in X versus Y. And in a normal microscope like this is, it's going to remain at 1. And again, the unit of length that we've sort of described this 3,000 as is microns. So you can put that in. And then you notice that it has filled in this little scale down here. And this is going to be a number that you need to make a note of. Right, go ahead and write that down. In my case, it is 0.412 pixels per micron. Now, if I click OK, what it does is it has rescaled this entire image so that that information is saved within it. And you notice that now it tells me what is the total size of my image, and it doesn't report it in pixels any longer, it reports it in microns. The pixels have been sort of moved into this parenthetical statement on the top of the image. So that is saved within this image. What I recommend doing so that you don't forget this is that you go ahead and save this in a non-compressed file format. TIFFs are what we typically use. So if you click save, it's going to default to a TIFF, and I'm just simply calling this 1x, but this is going to include the scale that I've already applied. And then effectively, if you end up closing this, or forgetting what that calibration one was, we can open up our TIFF, and it has remembered the scale. Now, this is a scale that you can reasonably apply to any and all images that you acquire using this exact same setup with the same lens. This is why we ask that you not immediately go ahead and try to zoom in digitally, because if you do that, then you will have a different number of pixels in your image that are represented by the same physical distance. So with that, you have built your cell phone microscope, you have calibrated it, and now you can go on and take images of whatever you want, and you know the actual linear distance of your microscope. So that concludes Lab 1. Lab 2 will be learning how lenses work, finding the focal length, and creating images.